In preparing us for the quotient rule, the third differentiation rule that we're going to be learning as part of Core 3, we want to be able to simplify fractions like these. So when we use the quotient rule, it's likely that we will end up with something that looks similar to this. And we want to make sure that we can simplify these fractions as far as we possibly can. So in both of these cases, they're quite straightforward to simplify. You could multiply everything by x to the half, for example, if you wanted to in the first one, or you could divide each piece by x to the half. So x to the half over x to the half. So you can split the fraction apart, and 5x to the minus a half over x to the half. So x to the half over x to the half will be 1. 5x to the minus a half over x to the half will be 5x to the minus 1. X to the minus a half divided by x to the half, minus a half, take away a half. So we're working with indices there, so the division of indices. So we could write it as 1 plus 5x to the minus 1. So that's one possible way of doing it. If you wanted to encase everything into one fraction, because ultimately in those cases you're then able to find stationary points much more easily. Well, in that case then you could, as I said first time, multiply everything by x to the half, multiply top and bottom by x to the half, and we would get x here, so x to the half times x to the half is just x to the 1. 5x to the minus a half times x to the half will just be 5. And then x to the half times x to the half is just going to be x. So you could write it as x plus 5 over x. In which case, if you had to put that equal to 0, then I can immediately say that x would have to be minus 5. Okay? So it is quite useful in that version. If we have a look at the second one, I'm going to do a very similar technique to there, multiplying top and bottom by x plus 1 to the half. If I do that, then I get x plus 1 to the half times x plus 1 to the half. That's just x plus 1. Then I get 2x plus 1 to the minus half times x plus 1 to the half. And so the x plus 1 to the minus half and the x plus 1 to the half cancel each other out, and I'm just left with the minus 2. And then the denominator, multiplied by x plus 1 to the half, I'm going to get x plus 1 to the 0, which is just going to be 1. And so this simplifies to x plus 1 minus 2, so x minus 1. Okay? So something that looks absolutely ghastly like that can simplify to something quite nice and straightforward.